Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and most importantly, besties, discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have lots of laughs along the way. So today we are wrapping up our discussion of Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. But before we do that, I want to give you all a sneak preview into the book that we'll be starting next week and be spending next month on, so you can go ahead and buy it and start reading it so that way you're ready for our episode next week. So Dana, do you want to tell the people what our next book pick is?
Yes, it is Sin and Magic by K.F. Breene. One of the things that we considered when we were creating our reading list for 2026 is that we wanted to do some book twos. And I even think we should do like finish a trilogy, but we wanted to do some book twos. And I personally believe that Rachel, she enjoyed Sin and Chocolate because that was book one. But I think she's going to like Sin and Magic even more. I believe. So we shall see.
I hear there's a mystery, so yes. I'm excited. If you can stick a mystery in a book, I'm like, there's a 90% chance I'm there. I'm like, okay, all right, let's do it. Well, so I'm excited.
And I think it does a good job. I mean, because, it picks up where the other story left off, and we see more of Lexi. Was it Lexi? Alexis? Mm-hmm. Or did she call herself Lexi too?
Let's see. Remember. Her name is... Yeah, I think her name is Alexis, and she calls herself Lexi, or people call her Lexi.
Well, we had a couple books with Lexi's or something.
Yeah, because then you have Alex Stern from Ninth House, but her full name is Galaxy. Right? So, we've got Alex's and Lexi's, and then
I feel like it was one more.
I know. I think we did have one in last year's books.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yes. So the wonderful thing about it is it picks up where we left off from book one, but it does get more into their romantic relationship, but not like all out. It is still a nice, steady, slow burn. And we learn more about the world, more about her powers, and sort of the scope of their world gets a little bit bigger. And so listen, I'll be rereading it, but it's a nice little representation for a book too, even though we know this is a longer kind of series with that same couple. We see more of the kids. We see more of his team. And so it's a good book too. I think it's a great book too. So I'm going to be excited to see what you think about it. And I think the other part that we didn't get a lot of that was mentioned in book one was knowing more about his father too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was just like teased mentioned. Of like, ooh. And then we're all like, okay, I know that he's probably, if he's not the big bad guy, he's like definitely on the way to the big bad guy.
So it's good. It's good. While at the same time, still being a little bit on the, it kind of was low key. It wasn't like action, but this one, she sort of gets into things. It sort of reminded me of, now my brain want to say Sin and Chocolate, but it's not Sin and Chocolate. The vampire one.
Oh, Dead Until Dark?
Yes. Eventually when she starts kind of getting in and starting to get into a little bit of trouble and still not realizing how much, she like in this one, like how much power she has and learning about that. And at the same time, trying to stay away from him. So I don't want to tell too much, but the point is, I think it reads faster because there's a little bit more going on and the beginning has been established. Yeah. And we get more into the world. We understand more about his mother, his father, their relationship, and of course her magical abilities.
Yeah.
And more of the kids. And it turned into something that I think was like, okay, it was kind of not unexpected, but it feels more like found family, a really good found family.
Ooh, which is like a favorite trope.
It is. I love
So good.
it. Yeah.
I'm excited also to just like, because this is our first book too,
Hmm.
that we get to talk about on the podcast. So I'm excited for how the conversation changes when we're looking at a second book in a series. Now we do have another second book in a series coming later in the year, which is exciting. But this is our first one. And I'm really looking forward to like just getting to follow the development of a series and get to talk about, how book one and book two relate to each other, how book two develops and escalates. Like, because for anybody who's trying to write a series, if they've already written book one and they're like wrestling through book two or book three, right, being able to kind of like track the trajectory, especially for a book, a series like this, which is like 7 books long. I'm really interested to see how that gets sort of paced out. Because ordinarily, book two, if you're in a trilogy, you're right in the middle and then there's only one more. But this is like building.
So
We have
building.
way more books to go. So I'll be really curious to see how it sort of like develops, knowing when you've got like a track that long.
Hmm. One of the things I always like whenever there's multiple books, especially with the same romantic character, is
Mm-hmm.
being able to spend some time with seeing how this author chooses to bring us up to date and how
Yeah.
they choose to bring us into this world while at the
Mm-hmm.
same time escalating the stakes.
Yeah.
Um, every author does it differently, and it's always, with the way we learn. I literally just wrote about this on a comment earlier today about like this is a cheat code, right? Of like being able to look at it and say, okay, this is what Brandon Sanderson did. This is what
Mm-hmm.
Kev Breene did. This is
Yeah.
what Stephanie Meyer did, because I still love Twilight. I don't care what nobody says, and and just figuring out for yourself where you sit in it and what serves your story and serves
Mm-hmm.
where you're taking it.
Yeah.
I even had a student this morning on our Q&A ask like, what's the difference between a series and a trilogy? And just starting to like unpack that. And I don't have to answer that question much, because a lot of my clients don't do trilogies. The ones
Mm-hmm.
that do it, it's epic. And so it's like just on a different scale. It's not that sort of
Yeah.
comparison. But here it's an opportunity to see, how do you do it? Because in book one, the thing that she did so unbelievably well is you were immediately like, and you
Mm-hmm.
just got her quirkiness and you sort of got her world.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just like, how will she do that again? And now the whole thing of like who she is, that sort of has been revealed, but then there's still more to it, right? That's what we
Yeah.
know for sure. So yeah, so I would say, allowing yourself, I mean, when you guys see this, we'll be starting next week. But I think
We'll
allowing
get to
yourself,
reading.
exactly, allowing yourself the opportunity to read. But I think it would be amazing if you were to go ahead and listen to or read book one and then go into book two, especially if it's going to help you get some of those individual insights like that we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about right now, because then you don't have to guess as much. It will
Mm-hmm.
be fresh, and you'll be able to take in those comparisons and sort of think through what you've learned from that and how you can apply it. And the last part is, in this series, I just like her writing style.
Yeah.
I like how it's pretty straightforward. Like it's
Yeah.
not it's it's dynamic in a sense that the people have layers. You can really sense more of the world building, but
Yeah.
it's not so much that you're sitting there like, wait, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
No, none of that, none of that. And so, and then it is more steam, not a
Yeah.
lot, if I remember correctly. It's not a lot, but it is, more steam than the first one.
I'll be the judge of that.
I was like, oh, let me go see what Rachel said about it.
You're gonna get a polo from me. I'm gonna read like the first 2 chapters and be like, "You didn't tell me that there was this and this." It's gonna be Twisted Love all
Well,
over again.
listen, I
We
was just
did
about to say, you
what?
made it through Twisted Love, girl. This is gonna be a cakewalk.
It's true. I think honestly, so far after Twisted Love, I'm like, all right, you can't like now I know there's crazier stuff out there.
It
I
is.
just haven't read it and it's not currently on like the lineup. And so I'm like, okay, anything right now, anything that's on our list, I can handle. I did Twisted Love. We done the.
Yeah, we don't have any. No. There's a couple that are on this list that I just cannot wait to see what your response is, because I think I know what your response will be.
I love this. Just like picture my reaction and find out if it's...
Your responses to any sort of fantasy is different than mine, because I am not a hardcore fantasy reader. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't even fully say that I'm a romantasy reader. I like it, but I wouldn't pick it. And there's the stuff that I've recommended, like, this is not fantasy, but it's very much in the paranormal kind of romance, paranormal spectrum that I would read, that I absolutely love. And then my other pick, or another one of my picks, I'm just curious to see. So the point is, but actually I'll back up. With that said, I think the other part of this that makes it really helpful is, like, how do you handle slow burn romance? And how do you handle romance where the relationship is still in the development process? This book, in a lot of ways, reminds me of a cozy, not in the heat spectrum, but how it slowly sort of just like unfolds. And the amount of steam that is added in is enough to keep the steamy romance person engaged. It's sort of like the book that we're talking about now. We didn't talk about the steam. I think she did a great job with that. But it was introduced earlier just through the memories and the dynamics from before, even though it wasn't on the page till later in the story. And so I think it does a great job. I think it's also a great opportunity for people who may want to write in this space and they just aren't as fully comfortable or confident in their ability to write sex scenes. I think it's a great, because you still have the intensity, you still have the heat, you still have the intention, but with fewer on page intimacy scenes. So I think that's another great thing about this as well.
Yeah, that's something I'll be curious to see, because I do find it interesting when you have a very slow burn, one couple over a long stand, like a several book series, how you sort of still deliver on the romance promises without, like, because you can't just be like, we're together, now we're not, we're together, now we're not, like, you can't just like do that number, but you have to stretch it out, but then you still want to deliver on those promises that, like, on the romance promises that readers are also showing up for as a part of the whole. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how she does that, because that's something that I've been curious about. I'm always kind of curious about when I see, like, especially long running series that follow a single couple.
Yeah, that's one of those moments too where you get a huge indicator by how it's set up. Right? Because if you think about it, you could tell that they were attracted to each other. That was not a question, but sort of how it unfolds begins to sort of establish the cadence, if you will. And this one, it does ramp it up a little bit. But again, I think it just sort of reminds me of how you would see a slow burn romance in a cozy, where it's almost like there's an onion to the relationship. And how you're peeling back those layers and it's slowly happening while there's still some level of intent between them and no inclusion of outside parties as they explore that. But this one does, you usually will find that it's got to be enough on the other side. So in this case, the question of his mother and his relationship with his father and what's going to happen to the dynamic of the world because of his plan that he shared in book 1. And so you will see that as well. So I think you really got to have that kind of detailed and almost just like really layered so that people are still entertained while you're slowly dripping out that relationship. And I think it can make for an even deeper, more intimate relationship because they are getting to know each other.
Yeah, and you've got like that space because it's the
Time.
space of multiple books rather than
That's
just
right.
inside of one book.
And time. Because
Yeah.
it's about them sort of, it's kind of like stretching it out. And
Hmm.
every author does this differently, because you may have those 6 books, but what if those 6 books are covering 6 months, right?
Hmm.
Or it could be 6 books and it's covering a year or so, or roughly, per book or whatever. So that
Hmm.
makes a difference too. So yeah, and I don't know what the timeline is in this, but I plan to, when I'm rereading, pay attention to that, as well as, you know, um, reread one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
one
so
was
that's
quite
what
a long
happened.
time ago.
It was.
No, it was like way back in sometime in 2025.
Oh my gosh. And I don't even know when. And we've done so many since then.
It was back in
September.
September, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I sort of, it was in September. So yeah, but I think everyone is going to enjoy it. I would say it's written well enough that you don't have to read book one. But I
mm,
will say this: I personally like book two better than book one. So I
hmm,
think if you read book two, you probably won't go back to book one.
yeah,
But I think book two is better. But which is sometimes it's kind of rare. You usually find that
yeah,
book one is better and then two is, but I think book two is better just because it sort of picks up the pace and the
hmm,
romantic relationship is really starting versus the sort of back and forth. And you've
yeah,
already sort of picked your favorites when it comes to the fact that you like her awards, and now you're
yeah,
getting more into his world, and they bring in other characters.
hmm,
So that is a good one too. Um, yeah, it really does feel like, now as I talk about it, it reminds me of this Sookie's Stackhouse.
yeah,
Um, when she went on, she was starting to meet other people, and he was sort of away, and the
yeah,
story is still sort of progressing, and he's sort of in it, but not in it. So
yeah.
yeah, yep.
All
So
right. So, lots to look forward to. That's coming at you guys next week. So, be sure to grab your copy and start reading so you're ready for our episodes as they come out next week. So, for the rest of today's episode, we're going to just kind of wrap up our discussion and talk about some of our big takeaways from Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. So, before we dive into our content, Dana, do you want to catch the people up with a summary real quick?
yes, and I want to add one final thing as a reminder. If you're new here, as a reminder, we try our best to pick books that have audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
This series, the series that we're, um, Sin and Magic, it does have an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something, to look into, which means you probably could find it if you check out books from the library. I'm almost certain her books are probably in the library system, because she has so many of them, but you can find it. Okay, so let's go to our summary. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan is a second chance romance that begins after the marriage has already ended. Yasmin and Josiah are divorced, but their lives remain deeply intertwined through co parenting their children and running the restaurant they built together. Both are trying to move forward, yet unresolved grief, emotional avoidance, and years of shared history keep pulling them back into each other's orbit. As therapy, parenting challenges, and long buried feelings surface, the story becomes less about whether they still love each other and more about whether they are capable of choosing each other again.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So, what are some of the big points you want to hit to wrap up our discussion of this book?
Okay, I'm going to leave your couple to the end because I just put them all together. I want to talk a little bit about, like, that this story, well, y'all, this is kind of lumping it together, and some's like a pro and a con, so it's a little bit of everything. Okay. I feel like I'm a host of caveats. I really want to mention again and lean into the fact that this is a very realistic romance. It's mature. There's really not a lot of pettiness. And like the caveat that I gave earlier in our episodes, that comes with some pros and some cons. And we will talk about that. But I think overall, it's a pro, especially if you're writing a story where it comes to talking about some very, this is some mature stuff when you're talking about death and grief and depression and, the things that are covered in this book. So that's the first one. The other thing that I want to talk about, which kind of is a great like piggyback off of that, is her balance of grief and joy. And I'm simplifying it, but she does an amazing job in this story of tackling something that is really challenging. Um, I don't think it's to the point of where you need a huge trigger warning because it is on the other side, but there is mention, there is flashbacks, and is a lot of discussion, if you will, about it. But she does a great job of sort of picking other focal points in the story to sort of lift us from that moment so that we don't stay in it long. And again, there are pros and cons to some of that as far as the highs and the lows, which I'll talk about it towards the end of my notes. The other thing that this story does amazingly well is layering. The themes, the relationships, the cast. It's layered, it's nuanced, and it really does sort of grip us and sort of holds us until the story is over. And the final thing is more of like a combination of all of that, which is more, I guess, probably more of a con. But this is one of those stories where if you are sort of tracking and pacing the energetic flow of it, I think it feels a lot like there's a lot of sort of sameness to it. And so I would like to discuss just a little bit of like the benefits of having some more highs and lows so that you really can. Number one, I think it just keeps it interesting. And I think it keeps it some of those great sort of moments that flavor it would stand out more. It wouldn't get so lost a little bit in the rest of it. And we saw this a little bit on many different levels, whether it was the relationships, whether it was the conflict, whether it was those moments where we seen a little bit of antagonism as far as between each other, but there wasn't enough variance, or there was moments where it sort of just wrapped up really quick and we didn't really get to sit in it. And that could be a pro to some, but I think for me, when I'm saying it now, it's more of a thing of just looking out for it, almost like cautionary. That I think it just keeps it so that there is momentum, and then you have almost another layer of pacing that can help keep us moving and keep us on the hook with the story. What about you, Rachel?
Yeah, so mine kind of, as usual, sort of like fit in with yours, because I did also kind of have that note about because of and these things sort of like go together, because of the nature of the conflict and the sort of interpersonal conflicts. We don't have a lot of like variation in moments, and so we don't, just to your point, we don't hit those high highs or low lows, because everything moves very sensibly, right? Everybody's like very sensible. And so this kind of goes into my next point, which, because this for me is like, it's a pro and a con, because everyone handles everything so well, which we talked about how wonderfully realistic, right? The people are, and the fact that there are no villains, which I love because that's so true to life. But on the flip side, what that means is that our conflicts, there's like a ceiling on them that you kind of can't break past because everyone is being so reasonable. And so the way that I'm thinking about it is, things that you want to, if this is sort of the kind of story that you're telling where you are having, you want it to feel more true to life or slice of life, some things that you might want to consider just to help it so that it doesn't feel like you lose out on emotional highs and lows in the process. And then the other thing that I kind of want to just touch on is how to handle your characters with history and incorporating those memories into the story. So we touched on it, we talked about it, but I just want to talk about some things to consider to help you think about how to actually layer memories into a story in a way that doesn't feel like bam, flashback or filler, right? Where it's sort of like, oh, we're just going to look back at the past because I don't know, I guess that's what we're doing, and how to layer those in so that they have meaning. And also it's it's crystal clear to the reader why this memory belongs here in the story. So I just want to kind of touch on some strategies for how to think about that as well.
And I don't have strategies for it. I mean, I will probably give notes, but I think one of the things, like as we go into this discussion, it reminds me of when I first started writing. Y'all, at one point in time, I used to write sweet romance.
Crazy world. What? Can't imagine.
Yes, you can. One of the things that I used to always wrestle with was the fact of having stories with low stakes. And sometimes you think that you cannot have the highs and the lows when you have low stakes. And the biggest thing that you can do when you have a low stakes story is making sure that you have stakes that are important to them. And I feel like, I think that's kind of, and I'm maybe going a little bit out of order, but it's just because of what you just said. I think that's what kind of made it feel a little bit off, because we know it was important to them. It was their family. It's their life. It's, what they lost, what they could stand to gain. And so not having that variance kind of just made it feel like even more like something was missing. And so, so I know I kind of went out of order. Can we talk about that first? Because I think that sort of spills, I don't know why my eye's itching. This spills over into everything else that we're talking about, which is me talking about the highs and the lows, and then also talking about the character being level. So if we could maybe start there, because I think that was one of the biggest things on our list to me.
For sure. Yeah. So, cause this goes with honestly, it's sort of the umbrella, like one of the umbrella categories. Cause this really goes to, the pros and your cons of your realistic romance. And it plays into the highs and the lows, and it deals with, not having villains in the story and what, people's sort of responses do and don't do within the story. And so do you want to kind of just start by talking about how do you wind up with this sort of almost, I don't want to say flat line, because we sort of have danced around that word, and it's sort of like
That's
most expeditious, but not the right one. But we sort of, again, we have a cap on our highs and our lows so that we don't have as much of that emotional variance. Do you want to kind of talk about some of the what is part of what's causing that and why we have that in the story?
Well, number one, I feel like this is one of those stories where to truly get it, you would have to probably do a lot of unpacking, because she does write super tight, right? It's not as obvious unless it's almost at first like a feeling in your chest more than it is an analytical reason. So what I would say, just loosely, without deep diving, I haven't done a deep dive on the story, is I would say, number one, I think the fact that one of the things that we talked about, that there not being external conflict, and the fact that there is some conflict, but not a big external stakes. What you're writing on is the internal, and a lot of that internal had to unfold slowly for it to be both relatable, believable, and realistic. For her to truly lock in with the style that this story is delivered in, she needed time. She needed time to be able to sort of like allow it to unfold. But then it also meant that in some of those moments when things did arise, them resolving quickly,
Yeah.
or there not being any sort of pushback. And it doesn't mean pushback as in there's got to be, drama or people being outside of themselves, or we take it from
Yeah.
being, a contemporary romance to being like an urban romance or something,
Yeah.
like we're not asking for that. However, I do think that the sense of maybe having a discussion of like, what is the spectrum of the conflict that you are exploring in this story, and where can we sort of kind of raise it above this bar? And then because the low end was covered because of the subject matter, there's no way you're going to talk about that and you not bottom out the emotions.
Yeah.
And then when we figure out why, well then dang, you go
Yeah,
even
there's like
lower.
it's worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's no way you can't, like you can shield yourself from that. So I think what happened here to me is that it was a pro, and we'll still go over the individuals. It was a pro that she sort of took things like celebrations, Thanksgiving, family gathering, having a block party, to be able to lift the spirits of that, but at the same time, not fully allowing those characters to sort of take it up a notch and make it as close and near and dear to them as the grief is. Right. And I think that's one of those things where, yes, it's friends, but I mean, if we look at the example that we talked about last week of the fact that Soledad and Hendrix are her girls, but they didn't know her then. And for most of the story, they don't know the full story. So using that as a full high is kind of not a full high.
Yeah.
It's almost like a fake, when they spell it FAUX, like a fake something, like a fake, it kind of feels like that. So what I would say is almost like when you are looking at your story and you pull back, I would really want to look for scenes and opportunities to pull it up. Maybe pull it up when there was a moment with the kids, because the kids are so closely intertwined with what's going on with the grief. And maybe even having something like a win or a breakthrough in a counseling session, right? Because that is so closely intertwined to what they're sort of battling and what they're journeying through in the story. And if you did continue to use the elements that they had in the story right now, maybe tying something else that's a little more connected to her other than her being there and her being present, it's good. Don't get me wrong. The last part is it's okay for tension to live.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't have to be resolved in the very next scene or whatever. And I'm not saying everyone was like that. So those are little ways. I mean, I'm saying little, but you really have to have a lot of thought, and you have to be selective, and you also have to think about your pacing.
Yeah.
And I think also you have to think about what kind of ride you're taking them on. Every time I think of roller coaster, I think about you now. So it always makes me laugh. Like it says, scream if you want to go.
Scream if you want to go faster. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. That's me.
Every time I think about a roller coaster, I always fluff up the sand, but I see you. So I think you have to think about that, because here's the other benefit of this, other than just making the suggestions. What it does is it helps us to truly appreciate the journey. When everything is sort of just like all in there, it's sort of like if you cook a meal and you don't use salt or pepper. It's like it can have some great ingredients in there, but if you don't get that salt to sort of vary the flavors, and you don't get that pepper in there to sort of enhance the flavor, then what starts happening is everything sort of just tastes the same. And so having that variation helps. And I also think having the variation in this regard, because there were so many great moments, I think certain moments would have standout moments.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of standout moments. I think all of them, I think it was good. I think it was a great story, but I don't have a lot of standout moments, but it's because all of them were good, but nothing felt like great. And, and so I think having that variance would help with that. And again,
Mm-hmm.
y'all, this story is amazing. You're going to like it the way it is. But if we're thinking about it from a sense of you studying it and what are some things that we could do? What are some things that we can learn? I think
Yeah.
these are things that we can always get better at. I'm always challenging myself when it comes to conflict and this is, I think, a thing that she did really great that was really great for me to see and is a great reminder is I have to keep myself from moving into suspense
Mm-hmm.
for those stakes, right? That
Yeah.
high and the low. And sometimes you don't want to go there. Then that means you
Yeah.
really got to lock in with what you have and
Yeah.
get really clear about the stakes the way you're really clear about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would have just, I think it would have taken something that was already a good story to
Mm-hmm.
being it. Well, probably like borderline, it had some great potential to maybe
Yeah.
being an excellent story because of the characters and all of that.
Yeah.
So having that in the stakes, having that across the story would have just been, I think it would have been a wonderful opportunity. And I think it would have made more aspects of this story live on in my
Yeah.
mind because right now it's sort of like muddied a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and this is like, I'm glad we have the opportunity to, now that we've talked about plot and we've talked about character, like to be able to kind of revisit what we said back in plot. And this is the reason why this is the reason why we talked about what felt like was missing was a sort of like singular external conflict to kind of help drive the story and to help sort of glue it together, because the characters are a major strength of the story. And you can write like, I like the characters the way they are. I like that we don't have villains, and I like that she managed to create interpersonal conflict among honest people. I think that that's a strength of the story, and the cast is again, the cast almost carried the story by and large. And so you don't, like, the thing is that you don't have to change that necessarily. It doesn't have to turn into drama rama for the story to feel like it can hit those the high positives or the high sort of just like high emotional like intensity of conflict or things going sideways. It doesn't have to be, we don't, just like you said, we don't need to have characters moving out of character just so that we can get a splash on the page. And that's why we talked about why an external conflict, like a singular guiding external conflict, would have been so helpful, because it would have meant that there's still something that's generating, that's kind of antagonizing from the outside and pushing on the characters, while the characters still get to be realistic and mature characters. And that's really what that external conflict does, is it allows the characters to still fully be themselves the way that they are and the way that we really enjoyed them in the story, but still give us some of that extra lift that we need to kind of push the story, give it a little bit more momentum, and um, and also to kind of give us, to kind of almost like give substance to the stakes that we know are there. We know that restaurant matters. We know the kids are important. Like, that's like, of course those things matter to them. And it would just give a little extra push to bring that to the forefront so we can feel those stakes rising without having to, tip over into suspense or anything else. And it's still, right, we're in not life and death stakes, but the stakes escalate over the course of the story.
Right, because because you don't have one that's a through line, and this is, I think it's important. Y'all, I have to say this, and I think I've said it before. A lot of this stuff I really have to think about because I don't naturally do it. Right. So, for example, when I'm thinking about external stakes, I'm thinking about tri-fail cycles of how many tri-fail cycles do I have in the story so that I am escalating, because I just want to chillax with the characters. I get it. So not having one and sort of having this one and it sort of falls off, and then this one that sort of
Mm-hmm.
falls off. It's almost like you kind of get a jump start and then it falls off and then another jump
Yeah.
start. And what we don't have is that connecting so that it continues to kind of slowly escalate if you want it to go slow, or have a
Mm-hmm.
sort of up and down to where it continues to move up before it drops out. And that one little change whether it could have been the storyline with the restaurant, or the storyline with Kasim, or maybe something else. I think the restaurant would have been a great thing.
Yeah. Oh, it would have been the perfect. I mean, it just like fits right in there.
It would have. Right. But right. So, but with saying that, the other part about that, what it could have helped to do is that it would have helped for us to be able to truly see how they were changing, other than the emotional changes, how their changes causes them to show up and react different, so that we see their decisions in action. And we saw it in their proximity to each other, but they were always working together. They they never had a non-functioning parental relationship. So I didn't doubt that they would find a way to handle what was going on with Deja, or that they were going to figure out something to work with Kasim. I knew they would. I mean, I didn't doubt that. So part of that would have been able to also see that same learning in their ability to come together around something that was important to both of them, that they could have potentially had a potential to lose or whatever. So the point is, and we'll look at these other things, but I think that one thing could have helped to cross a lot of T's and dot a lot of I's. And I mean, and again, it is a good story. But I think that's one of those things that if we don't have her name, right, and we don't have a huge audience, that making sure that we sort of have everything locked and loaded the best that we can, just on the strength of the story, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's right why we have these conversations of like, if this were, if you're a debut, or if you're not, don't have as established a catalog or an audience, that's the kind of thing that sort of wielded less expertly, and by someone who has less of a group of readers who have an established she has an established reputation with them. So like, it's the same thing with, again, I talk about this all the time. I always use this example. Brandon Sanderson, right? Stormlight Archive, his biggest, meatiest series. And he's like, don't start there. Don't read that book until you can trust me as a writer. So read some of my shorter, punchier works. And of course, shorter in quotes, because that's Mistborn. Just not especially short. But the point is that when you have an audience who knows you as a storyteller, you can, like, they will kind of, they'll go with you. And you can kind of tease those boundaries and do that kind of thing a little more easily. But when you are still sort of developing a reputation with readers, and you are still sort of developing your way of doing things and that trust with your audience, you run the risk of losing them. And that's why we talk about these kinds of things, because you could, and I think in a less established hand than Kennedy Ryan, this could have easily just sort of like fallen off, where it's sort of just kind of like the story itself peters out,
Yeah, but I think the great characters and you just really being invested just held it all together, right? Yep. It really cemented it. So I'll go into the first part of my list then. So this just shows like, this is a realistic, mature romance. If you are writing a story where, listen, your folks are grown, right? They are living their lives, and you are putting them in this new set of circumstances, or taking them on this journey, even if it's not something that's highly emotional, but where we find them in their life and how they choose to address the obstacles that come into their lives. And this will be something that really is something that you could just feel like, I know these people. And I will say that their responses at all time felt in alignment with the characters that they were and how they were presented. And so this is a great story for that. I think it's great, especially if you're somebody that's doing like later in life, in this case, a second chance. And I don't think, of course, it's not exclusive to African American romance. I think it could be any romance, but it
Hmm.
does just kind of just like how they navigate real world
Yeah.
issues, you know?
Yeah. I want to ask because you sort of like you talked about this as a realistic, mature romance. And then, you sort of introduced this by saying that had some pros and some cons. Really talked about the cons. Can you talk to me a little bit about like what are some of the pros of doing a more realistic, mature romance?
I think you speak to more readers.
Mm.
I think you speak to more readers because your audience, I think now, and especially, I mean, especially being who she is,
Hmm.
and she's very vocal about the experience of Black women and love and all of that. And so I think it would speak more to the audience because many of them don't want to read a story about no 24-year-old woman.
Hmm.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? This is a woman
Yeah.
that done been through some stuff, that got some stretch marks. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I think and it makes it, especially for the fact that you're making it realistic, it feels realistic and it's
Yeah.
speaking to a real woman, right?
Yeah.
You have different considerations. You're not having a consideration of someone that's starting off a new job and they don't have anything major to lose. You're talking
Yeah.
about somebody that has a mortgage and
Hmm.
kids and a business and
Yeah.
employees and bills and some people, they don't want to hear that because you don't
Yeah.
understand. No way, get a few more years before you talk to me, right?
Yeah.
Look, that's one of them don't come for me lest I send for you moments. So I
Yeah.
think there's that. I also think what that also means is that you have an opportunity, like she did here, to explore some real world scenarios.
Yeah.
And this is one of those very unique opportunities where you have the opportunity as a writer to speak life over things that have died in people's lives.
Yeah.
That can really help people see themselves over to the other side. Yes, they're being entertained, but can you imagine how many people may have considered counseling or
Yeah.
considered their loss of that was similar to this, like Yasmin's loss,
Yeah.
as being, oh, it's not just me. And it makes it so that you can be someone who's a novelist that have an opportunity to truly connect with people. And it's
Yeah.
a connection that feels so authentic and real.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so amazing about this book because she
Hmm.
did that so well, it
Yeah.
transcends everything that I just said earlier.
Yeah, for sure.
It transcends it. So
Yeah.
therefore, like, if I were your coach or your editor, would I have loved for you to? Absolutely. If you
Yeah.
would have still came up with this, I would still be cheering just as loud, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's that. The last part about this, and I just would feel like it's not the last, but the last part I will bring up. I think looking at your audience, and again, Kennedy Ryan is very vocal about the Black woman experience. Black woman's experience in entertainment, the older Black woman's experience as being writers and in this career and being in, like, she's also doing TV shows and movies, I think.
Mm.
So I think this is also speaking to an audience that feels like you're being left out of conversations when you are the conversation.
Mm.
So what I mean by that is people talking about young, this, that, and other, when it is the mature woman
Hmm.
that's holding things down, that's got things
Yeah.
going, that's opening doors. This
Hmm.
generation that Yasmin would be in would be the one, you're one of the first still to do a
Yeah.
lot of things. And
Hmm.
so you're speaking to that 30 to 50 something audience of grown women that done
Hmm.
been through some things, you know?
Yeah.
And she feels seen, she feels heard, she
Yeah.
feels like love is still in the cards for her, like all of those things that romance can do. And I think that's where the mature and realistic aspect of it, so it doesn't feel like it's so far away. It feels
Yeah.
like very much it could be mine. And I
Yeah.
think that's the part that this touches on in so many ways. And that you can have growing and thriving relationships later in life. How many people do you hear
Yeah.
talking about that? You know, that you
Yeah.
can have your kids in private school or in public school and have a choice and have a
Yeah.
thriving business that is expanding. And it's not an either or, it's just about time. And, you know, that's what
Yeah.
women in that category and in that bracket they don't have to hear because they're going to get it anyway, but it feels nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's what I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's again, we talked about this, I think it was last week, where, like, again, to your point, like the stuff we talked about plot, those for me are on the list of like nice to haves, you know. But you're right, like the way that she handled the characters and the content, that really is like the transcendent aspect of the story. So like I don't have an experience like Yasmin in the story. There are so many experiences that she, I mean, I'm not a mom, like I'm not a black woman. There's so many experiences that she has I have not had. And I'm younger than her. I don't even have a mortgage. I'm renting a
Rachel
house.
said, I am not a black woman.
Just for the listeners who were unsure, who haven't seen the podcast, my pasty face.
Say a lot about the bitches in the back.
The point being that Yasmin has seen some things in life that I have not seen in my own experience. And yet I can read this story and like,
you're not excluded. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I have, I've had rough periods of my life where I look back and I'm like, ooh, who was that girl? And Dana, you were there for a lot of them. Where I'm like, oh no, like that wasn't me. And I'm, and you're sort of like, you're sorry for what that time was. But then that there's also like, there's hope for you on the other side of that. And that is right, again, that's the transcendent aspect of this story. And that's the transcendent aspect where it touches on honest human experience, where like, I don't know if I know anyone who hasn't had those periods of life where it was like, that was not, I don't know who was in the driver's seat, but it was not the me I know myself to be, and so being able to have a message and a like, but this is something she's done so well. It doesn't feel like preachy, right? Where it's like trying to like break through and like be inspirational, be like, bam, go to therapy. Like the way that she handled therapy and the therapist sessions and the way that it helped them honestly navigate their internal, like their experiences and what they were going through. Again, this is one of those things that she makes it look easy. That's not easy to bring therapy in and it not feel like you're really trying to tell us something very specific, where what happens is that where the author's hand is breaking through the story, right? The experience of the story. So we're experiencing the story. And then all of a sudden the author's like, bang, I'm here. And that's like, but she doesn't do that. And so the fact that she's able to sort of bring this very empowering, impactful story so that someone in Yasmin's position like can experience like hope or like that reminder that like this is for me and this is at hand. And sometimes you just got to weather a little bit more of that storm and there's something on the other side. And that someone like me could feel that same way. That is an art form. That is not that easy to do. And she does it really beautifully. And I think that's just getting to what you talk about with this sort of more realistic, this more mature romance. I think that like she kind of touched on that transcendent aspect of human experience.
Yeah, and I will say, the last, well, it's not the last part, but the last part of this is like, it also teaches us that when you hit that, it doesn't have to be perfect. Man, it covers like a multitude of sins. It just it will smooth out rough edges. It will, because I listen, I say many times there are some stories that I know it could have been, but listen, that is where I was. And listen, it did well and people still read it to this day, because a lot of times it's what's underneath it that actually touch people. And if they stop and they examine every single word and they're going to see some stuff. Well, baby, just keep going. Keep going. Just let your eyes go room to room right over the page. And I think that's one of those things where it's just, she had something in her that really needed to be birthed through the story. And it was.
Yeah.
It really was. And I think that's part of what just touched so many people. And that kind of goes into the other thing that I was talking about. Like, you see her sort of balancing this grief and also with the joy, whether that was celebrations, the family Thanksgiving dinner, the moments with the kids, like when they were dancing on the dance floor at the like block party, and finding, I think those were those kind of attempts, like, to have those highs and those lows so that you just didn't stick in it so long, and having the girlfriends that was like cutting up and all of that, right? Like, you can find different ways to do it. And she did those. And then finally on my list, like, was the layering. And I think we've just talked about that, right? Whether it's the themes, you just don't talk about the grief in counseling. You talked about it from the perspective of her being in the thick of depression and dealing with counseling, to the counseling used as a tool for their children, to counseling coming in for Josiah at a later time, but still being effective. And they didn't touch on it a lot, but also the fact that him having a counselor that felt like it was a Black man that was his counselor, like how sometimes that's helped to get over the barrier when you have somebody that relates to you. And that's been a big push in the counseling world. And in that sort of mode to get things out, you think about, what is it called? They have a lot of resources now, and I've even seen celebrities creating nonprofit organizations for mental health and counseling, and spearheading initiatives to have more minorities becoming counselors, so that there will be more options for minorities having resources and having people that look like them and understand their life experiences. So I think that was, she covered all of that, not with the funding part, but she covered a lot of that without it feeling preachy, without it feeling out of norm. And I think it's because we were so tapped into their experience that we didn't transfer what she was saying to them to us directly, but we got the spray of the like, the little sprinklings of the water, that it kind of came over to us. And so the relationships, the cast, wanting to find out more about the others, cheering on the kids and them making their transformation while their parents was making their transformation, even down to when they sort of started getting back together. And it was like, we don't have to tell you anything.
Oh man, there were some moments when Josiah would lay down the law. He said, "This is grown folks' business," and I was like,
"Listen,
tell him, come on, tell him, tell him."
That is a daddy move, baby. He did what daddies can do. That's what daddy. Listen, when you got a good daddy, be like, "Listen, I hear your mom, but I don't got to tell you nothing." And it was so there, and it was, and that's the thing of when he was having those moments of like, wait, did I support her? Like, and it was like that energy. That's the energy that she needed. And he just, again, we don't see it. So that was all of my things, but wrapped up in a bow. That is your turn. But yeah, I feel like a saying that makes you hear how much I enjoyed the story, but also seeing from the sense of what I can learn and what could be different if I wanted to just try something on. It's like taking those strong points and then how you could potentially make it stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll make a couple of notes because what I really want to go out is on, honestly, this like really high crescendo. And I'm like, oh crap. Hang on. I have one more boring technical thing to tell. More unsexiness to come from me because I can't go on being like, I'm the queen of unsexy. I'm like, that can't be my thing.
No, it cannot, please.
No, ma'am. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk
queen
about.
Of unsexy.
Let's be like, I'm Rachel Arsenault and I'm the unsexy editor. Welcome. It's just, you can't. No.
Oh my god. A hot mess. Oh my goodness.
So, see, emphasis on hot. Considering I'm keeping the house at 66 degrees in the winter, that also falls. So the last thing I just kind of want to like touch on is because this is something that almost every writer has to sort of deal with when we talk about backstory. And when we talk about bringing backstory in, and when we talk about sort of like memories and like a character's history, whether it's an individual character's history or history between characters. Now, some of your best ammunition for like your dialogue and your character dynamics, whether or not it makes it directly on the page, is going to be your character's like history with one another, right? Like that is just, if you are struggling to really understand your characters and how they're relating to each other, like this is one of those places to start kind of digging and saying, wait a minute, like, how do they know each other? What were their first impressions? How did their relationship develop? What experiences of each other have informed the way that they relate to each other? Because in most stories, you will pretty much always have your protagonist maybe meeting some new people, meeting new characters. But somewhere in that story, there are probably people that are, by and large, people that they know from somewhere else. There's probably at least some of those. And so the first thing is like, if you're going to, so number one, just investigate their history with each other, right? Those dynamics and the way that they speak to each other, like all of that can really come from interrogating, how do they know each other? What do they know each other from? What is that relationship between them? But then when we're talking about getting that onto the page, anytime you're bringing memories out onto the page, you're looking to bring those in at moments that are relevant to the present moment. So we don't want to go off on like a tangent, right? Again, we want to keep the reader, want to give the reader information that they need and that they want. And so to do that, you want to bring that into relevance in the scene that you're in. And so this might look like, something that shaped how the protagonist is viewing their present situation. We see this loads. We see it in this story. We see it. The example I always pull for that particular one is Ninth House. For my writers who are having to bring in backstory and need to kind of like layer in some of that memory. A point of contrast or confluence. So either this moment is like this other moment, or this moment is not at all like this other moment. Or an event that led the protagonist to the situation they're in now. And so number one, you want to really find those ultra specific, individualized details. Again, grain of wood, jerry rigging a seat belt and a beat up old Honda. If we're talking about what I said last week, slugs in the bathtub. Those ultra specific things that just anchor that memory in something that feels really real. And so getting into those specific moments, but using those memories to illuminate the present moment so that what they're thinking, what they're reflecting on, and what's happening are in some way informing each other so that we can very clearly see like why they would be thinking about this, right? Why they would be remembering this thing in the first place. And then what bearing it has on the story and on the individual character and how they're engaging this present moment. So those are a couple of my like, okay, here's some like instances and like that you can sort of use those memories in the present moment just to kind of help bring those in smoothly and relevantly so that the reader is like, right, they're getting information. They're like, oh, this is interesting, or this explains something, or, oh, I didn't like know that about this character, but it makes what's happening right now make a whole lot of sense, or whatever that sort of like phenomenon might be.
But I just love the fact that you gave that as an example. One of the things that I always do when I'm working on character development or I'm talking to a client is I'm always asking them to know at least 3 to 5 stories that connect with what they're experiencing here, or stories from their past that sort of reaffirmed the lie that they're living by, or that informed what they're going through, like what they would draw on that we do naturally.
Yeah.
In this case, those stories were so helpful for them because those were the stories that we would have probably experienced had they fallen in love on page.
Yeah.
Right. But it was the stories that caused them to fall in love. And it is the ones that they probably always go back to. Like there was that moment when they were kind of standing on the porch. I think that's when they no, they didn't do that story then. I think that was when they were thinking about the Christmas.
Yeah.
When they, when they didn't have all these different things and they didn't go to a party because they didn't want people, and it would have been the moment where they would have fallen in love with each other and we would have experienced that. And now they're looking back at it through a different lens because of the pain that they've been through. So it does so many things other than sort of tethering those characters together. It also provides insight into like how they could feel about losing this one person, which they kept saying that they never thought that they could live without. And they still aren't technically living without them, but they're not living with them the way that they dreamed.
Yeah.
And so it was very helpful in this setting to help ground us in the romance because the love was already there. And it helped them because baby, once they got back together, they was rolling. Okay. All right. Any other notes that you want to do from your list? Because I think we covered everything.
The last just little like boop, like cherry on top that I want to just kind of add to what you just said about, memories and flashbacks. There's a phrase that we use a lot on this podcast, and it's a favorite of ours, and it's double duty, right?
Yes.
Anytime we are doing a flashback, bringing in a memory, simply information that the reader needs is not enough reason.
That's right.
It has to do double duty. It has to tell us more than just, they got to know this thing from the past, so I'm just going to like stick it in there. Information is not enough to, number one, invest the reader in that information, because they're already having a lot coming at them as, just the story generally. But purely information is not enough. So you really want, just like Dana was talking about, like you want that to do double duty. You want it to tell us more than just the information you're communicating. So that's an extra sort of like, look out for that, because I see it happen a lot by mistake where it's like, well, I put it in here because they need this information. I'm like, okay, well, I need more reasons than just information to tie me to that information, for me to want that information and for it to stick in my mind. Because sometimes when you're just like throwing stuff at the reader because they need information, they don't have any buckets to put it in. They don't have any hooks to hang it on. And so it just like washes straight over them and they will not remember that you told them. And so by connecting it, like having more points of connection, that's going to make that information matter and make it stickier for the reader.
Yeah. And I think my final thing is going to be ultimately with this story, which is one of the reasons why I selected it. Kennedy Ryan can tell the daggone story. Like you have no doubts that you will read another one of her stories and you feel invested. And I think she just has a way of telling them that we would all just love as storytellers to just have our very sort of unique take on a thing that is a common experience. And the more you hear other things about her, it just makes you love it even more. Yeah. Because it comes from a place that makes you just respect it and want to support it. And I remember seeing this book everywhere. And I have my TBR list is unheard of. So I just wasn't trying to add another book. And then I heard her talk at an event. And I went and bought the book, the audio book, the paperback.
Oh, the Dana classic. The full suite, the perfect hat trick.
I did. Because at the end of the day, you need stories like this. People need stories like this. And I absolutely love when it's a story like this that's a novel, because it shows the power of the pen, whether you're telling fiction or nonfiction. And she's just like, you know what? Hold my beer. You know what I'm saying? I don't even know if she drank beer. She's saying, hold it. Watch me do what I do.
Anything for you, Kennedy Ryan.
Come on. watch me do what I do. I can show you better than I can tell you. And we, and we're here for it. So another great book. And yeah, I'm looking forward to reading more by her in the future. And I'm looking forward to our next read.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you. This was a fantastic pick, Dana. And I think just had so much good there's so much good stuff to talk about. And so this was such a great pick. And such a different, this is different from a lot of the books we picked last year.
Yes.
That were very sort of like external plot just driven, and so something more, a little bit more emotional, a little more intimate, was a fun variety to kind of have in the mix here. So fantastic choice. If you have listened to this conversation, now the benefit is that we didn't do any spoilers. So there's so much that you don't know about this story from our conversation. Except how much good stuff is in it. So if you haven't read it yet, I highly encourage you to grab the audiobook. You can find the audiobook at in libraries, because sometimes you've got like Audible exclusives, and then Audible exclusives libraries can't get those, and blah blah blah. So ebook, audiobook, and physical copies you can get however you prefer. So if you haven't read it yet, I do highly recommend this one. Even if you're not accustomed to steamy, you can skip those parts, you'll be okay. And also they don't really happen until way later in the story. So
you're wrong with saying you can skip it.
Well, I mean, it's just, again, I'm thinking about my audience who's not romance people, and I'm
it's worth it.
I think if
we didn't even touch on that, the fact that she really was very selective with the steamy scenes, and it really did advance the plot. So that is a good part about the steamy scenes, but the other parts were just more important to us today. Yeah.
So make sure you grab this book and give it a read. And next week we will be back with our overview to start our discussion of Sin and Magic. So read this book, also read that book, and then read the first book if you haven't read it yet. Just kidding. You can read this second one. If you haven't read the first one, you can read this. You can start with the second one per Dana's recommendation. Basically, your TBR is getting longer and longer, so you better get to work on it. And join the club, because Dana and I keep a Notion board where I just try to keep up with all of the books that I need to read, because I can't remember the sheer volume of them. So thank you everyone so much for joining us for these 4 weeks talking about Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Be sure to check us out at storydeepdive.com. Follow this podcast or follow us on YouTube, however you prefer to listen. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And hit the like button, subscribe, do all those nice things. Oh, and leave us a comment, a rating or review. We'd love to hear from you. And again, we'd love to know what you thought about this book and what questions you have about storytelling. So we will see you next week to get started with Sin and Magic. But until then, happy writing.